Chapter 35 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Daisy 55. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 35. Ruth is not like Lorna. Although by our mother's reluctant consent, a large part of the obstacles between Annie and her lover appeared to be removed, on the other hand Lorna and myself gained little, except as regarded comfort of mind and some ease to the conscience. Moreover, our chance of frequent meetings and delightful converse was much impaired, at least for the present, because though mother was not aware of my narrow escape from Carver Doone, she made me promise never to risk my life by needless visits. And upon this point, that is to say, the necessity of the visit, she was well content, as she said, to leave me to my own good sense and honor, only begging me always to tell her of my intention beforehand. This pledge, however, for her own sake, I declined to give, knowing how wretched she would be during all the time of my absence, and on that account I promised instead that I would always give her a full account of my adventure upon returning. Now my mother, as might be expected, began at once to cast about for some means of relieving me from all further peril, and herself from great anxiety. She was full of plans for fetching Lorna, in some wonderful manner, out of the power of the Doones entirely, and into her own hands, where she was to remain for at least a 12-month, learning all mother and Annie could teach her of dairy business, and farmhouse life, and the best mode of packing butter. And all this arose from my happening to say, without meaning anything, how the poor dear had longed for quiet, and a life of simplicity, and a rest away from violence. Bless thee, mother, now long in heaven. There is no need to bless thee, but it often makes a dimness now in my well-worn eyes when I think of thy loving kindness, warmth, and romantic innocence. As to stealing my beloved from that vile Glendoone, the deed itself was not possible, nor beyond my daring. But in the first place, would she come, leaving her old grandfather to die without her tendance? And even if, through fear of Carver and that wicked counsellor, she should consent to fly, would it be possible to keep her without a regiment of soldiers? Would not the Doones at once ride forth to scour the country for their queen, and finding her, as they must do, burn our house, murder us, and carry her back triumphantly? All this I laid before my mother, and to such effect that she acknowledged, with a sigh, that nothing else remained for me in the present state of matters, except to keep a careful watch upon Lorna from safe distance, observe the policy of the Doones, and wait for a tide in their affairs. Meanwhile I might even fall in love, as mother unwisely hinted, with a certain more peaceful heiress, although of inferior blood, who would be daily at my elbow. I am not sure but what dear mother herself would have been disappointed, had I proved myself so fickle, and my disdain and indignation at the mere suggestion did not so much displease her, for she only smiled and answered, "Well, it is not for me to say. God knows what is good for us. Likings will not come to order, otherwise I should not be where I am this day. And of one thing I am rather glad. Uncle Reuben well deserves that his pet scheme should miscarry. He who called my boy coward, an ignoble coward, because he would not join some crack-brained plan against the valley which sheltered his beloved one. And all the time this dreadful coward, risking his life daily there, without a word to anyone. How glad I am that you will not have, for all her miserable money, that little dwarfish granddaughter of the insolent old miser." She turned, and by her side was standing poor Ruth Huckleback herself, white and sad, and looking steadily at my mother's face, which became as red as a plum, while her breath deserted her. "If you please, madam," said the little maiden, with her large calm eyes unwavering, "it is not my fault, but God's Almighty, that I am a little dwarfish creature. I knew not that you regarded me with so much contempt on that account. Neither have you told my grandfather, at least within my hearing, that he was an insolent old miser. When I return to Dulverton, which I trust to do to-morrow, for it is too late to-day, I shall be careful not to tell him your opinion of him, lest I should thwart any schemes you may have upon his property. I thank you all for your kindness to me, which has been very great, far more than a little dwarfish creature could, for own sake, expect. I will only add, for your further guidance, one more little truth. It is by no means certain that my grandfather will settle any of his miserable money upon me, if I offend him, as I would in a moment, for the sake of a brave and straightforward man. Here she gave me a glance which I scarcely knew what to do. My grandfather, upright as he is, would leave me without a shilling, and I often wish it were so. So many miseries come upon me from the miserable money." Here she broke down, and burst out crying, and ran away with a faint good-bye, while we three looked at one another, and felt that we had the worst of it. "Impudent little dwarf," said my mother, recovering her breath after ever so long. "Oh, John, how thankful you ought to be! What a life she would have led you!" "Well, I am sure," said Annie, throwing her arms around poor mother, "who could have thought that little Tommy had such an outrageous spirit? For my part, I cannot think how she can have been sly enough to hide it in that crafty manner, that John might think her an angel." "Well, for my part," I answered laughingly, "I never admired Ruth Huckleback half, or a quarter so much before. She is rare stuff. I would have been glad to have married her to-morrow, if I had never seen my Lorna. And a nice nobody I should have been, in my own house," cried mother. "I never can be thankful enough to darling Lorna for saving me. Did you see how her eyes flashed?" "That I did, and very fine they were. Now 9 maidens out of 10 would have feigned not to have heard one word that was said, and have borne black malice in their heart. Come, Annie, now, would not you have done so?" "I think," said Annie, "although of course I cannot tell, John, that I should have been ashamed at hearing what was never meant for me, and should have been almost as angry with myself as anybody." "So would you?" replied my mother. "So any daughter of mine would have done, instead of railing and reviling. However, I am very sorry that any words of mine which the poor little thing chose to overhear should have made her so forget herself. I shall beg her pardon before she goes, and I shall expect her to beg mine." "That she never will do," said I. "A more resolute little maiden never yet had right upon her side, although it was a mere accident. I might have said the same thing myself, and she was hard upon you, mother dear." After this we said no more, at least about that matter, and little Ruth, the next morning, left us, in spite of all that we could do. She vowed an everlasting friendship to my younger sister Eliza, but she looked at Annie with some resentment when they said good-bye for being so much taller. At any rate, so Annie fancied, but she may have been quite wrong. I rode beside the little maid till far beyond Exmoor, when all danger of the moor was past, and then I left her with John Fry, Not wishing to be too particular,